Okay, so I have wiped this out with a cloth and gotten the clay and everything out of it, gotten it pretty clean. I also, at the same moment, I took the same paper towels and cloths and I wiped off the face because you're going to want to do that, and it's great if you do it now because then the clay won't be hard and dry. It'll be soft and you can get it off pretty easily. Doesn't have to be sparkling clean, but we don't want big chunks of dry clay left on these. It makes them hard to use. So you're going to put that away because you don't need it anymore. All right, for your next step, you're going to prep this to make it. I always use the word bowl because you need it to hold liquid, right? So if you can see what I'm doing here, if I do this, if I cover up this end of this shape, I will have basically a bowl that will hold plaster. I need to keep in mind that this is sort of a low point. I can tip it a little bit, okay? But I'm going to take some plaster bandages and I'm going to cover this end of the form, okay? The other thing that you're going to need for this moment is a tub of sand, which this is like right here out of camera. They are below the counters where we're working. You'll see several tubs of sand. Those will support your form once we finished with this next step, okay? The other thing that you're going to need is another roll of bandages. You will not use all of this roll, so if you are not the first one to do this process, you should check and make sure that there's like a roll that has already been started by some of your friends in the class. So for this, you're going to want just a collection of long strips, okay? Because basically we're going to cover up the end of that and we're going to maybe reinforce some of our other edges, okay? The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little tiny bit of reinforcement on the outside of this. I took off camera and held this up to the light and realized that I'm seeing a bit of light through at the very tip of the nose down here, up on an eyebrow and in one of the cheeks. And so I may take a little bit of plaster bandage and put on those areas also, just so I don't get leaking, okay, when we go to put our plaster in. Okay, so same deal. I've got some water back here off camera. Burr, burr, burr. Here it is on camera. I'm going to dip and I'm going to scrape. Okay. Then I'm going to cover this end. I'm basically going to build up a wall on the end of this. Okay. So I started that like that. Just building it across. If you saw, I just did a little fold down along that top edge. That'll sort of help make it a little firmer up there. Doesn't have to be super thick. You just want to make sure that everything has plaster in it. And you don't want to get a lot of plaster down into your shape that you've spent a lot of time creating down there. Going to put a strip right along this top edge here too, because that's a little looking like it could use a little build up there, just to make that a little more sturdy. Wasn't very graceful, was it? It should be okay though. I'll just give it a little bit of a more of a support up there. And that's pretty, that's relatively level. It might be a little higher here, but I think it'll all balance out, okay? Basically, you're gonna be pouring a liquid into this. So you wanna make sure that it's not tipping so that you're missing an area with your liquid, okay? Now I'm gonna do what I promised, which is I'm going to do these little extra places where I noted that I was able to see through. We're gonna put a blob of plaster bandage under that nose down here, if you can see where I'm doing it. Oh, that was awkward. Okay. And then I'm gonna get that eyebrow that I mentioned, which was this one, I believe. And again, you do all this from the outside because your inside you want to stay nice and smooth. But you don't really care what this outside part looks like. But you want to not be able to see daylight sort of through your mold. Hold that up again. Yeah, that's pretty much gotten it. Okay. So now I've got some leftover bandages here that somebody else could use, as long as I don't get water on them, which I'm going to do my best not to do. What I'm going to do to let this dry so that it dries sort of level is I'm going to set this down into the sand. Okay, we use sand. Some people use clay to support. We found that sand works really well for this because you don't want your nose to get squished when you pour plaster in it. Of course, when you pour the liquid plaster in there, the nose is gonna take a lot of weight, and we don't really want that. Okay, so I'm gonna hold that like that, and then I'm gonna dig some clay up under it like that, just to hold it while these parts dry. Okay, this is just a temporary. I'll show you once the edges of this dry, we'll get this in here more firmly. But this is just a support so that it's not having to lay on the pieces that I want to dry and be flat. Okay, so we'll be back once this dries, and we'll get it prepped, and we'll get some plaster in it.